We're using a combination of computer technology, miniature photography, and just about every kind of technique that's available to special effects artists to create the visuals for this film.
Batman Forever came at a time when we were just at the beginning of the digital revolution. And that made it okay for me to say, now we can use this digital medium to work on this movie. But there were still limitations to creating objects and certainly to creating characters. What the digital realm eventually allowed us to do was become much more filmmakers and much less engineers.
The city of Gotham doesn't really exist, and as a result, rather than try to build a real city or dress a real city, we're going to build our city in miniature. The design of these shots begins with the description that is in the script, proceeds through that through illustrations and designs via the production designer and storyboards that are drawn in conjunction with the director to create the moves and the scenes that are necessary to tell the story.
There's a standard line, and it's in every script that is a visual effects script, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And it pops up all the time. So it's like, okay, they come to a cliff edge. They look over, and there's the city below, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And that is generic. The script is a living document, so even though you put an enormous amount of energy and preparation into one version of the scene, you have to be prepared for, on a moment's notice, the scene changing significantly. It's like spinning plates in the air.
Look up! That's a cut!
Joel was very open to collaboration, which is great, which means that lots of people from within the company would talk about a given sequence. And you had to have communication because there was a determination being made by the producer as to whether something would be visual effects or whether we would do it practical or whether it would be mechanical effects or stunts.
You know, you're creating your own world. You're creating your own Gotham City, so everything has to be invented. And even though we went onto the streets of New York and used it for Gotham City, we had to reinvent the streets of New York to be ours so that they're lit and the architecture and everything about them has the flavor of the rest of the film.
I was pleased with the city. I thought it looked terrific. I thought the miniatures were really successful. It was pretty exciting and fun. I was quite pleased. This is the last big miniature movie that I've done. Miniatures are kind of going away. They're not going away, but they're slowly being, bit by bit, replaced by computer-generated imagery.
This particular shot, Eric Durst and the people at Chandler Film are going to duplicate the animatic that was created in a computer. The background buildings that you see here are mathematical models of real buildings that we're using on the set. The helicopter is a mathematical model of the helicopter that we're actually going to photograph as a miniature. And the composite of the two was done in a computer to the length and to the choreography of the shot that we want to put in the film. So what'll happen is Eric and the people here will take and match the move on this background. We can switch across to the buildings, and you can see these buildings have pretty much the same move that you saw in the computer-generated image. As you can see, we've begun to match up the move of the computer-generated animatic, which is sort of our template for the shot, with the real buildings photographed on a stage using a motion control camera. And of course, we're still using the computer-generated helicopter as a placeholder for the miniature of the helicopter that we'll eventually shoot.
This will fix him.
In terms of the Batman character being agile and doing superhuman things, and that you can work on forever and never get right. You will always find improvement in how the character animates and how you create the sense of physics in that character's world. It's tough because if a man jumps off a 30-story building, he will end up a small pile of bone and blood. However, Batman leaps off a 30-story building and he survives it. And not only survives it, he survives it with panache. When I do work with principals, usually the principal's already coming to you saying, okay, what is it that's going on here? And exactly what am I seeing? And then you have to be able to tell them in words, describe for them an image that has dimension that they can relate to, because they have to relate to it in the scene that they're doing. They will be pleased to do it as long as it doesn't look like you're trying to cover yourself. In other words, they'll do as many takes as you want if they understand that they've got to get a good take and get the timing right. But if you just keep doing takes and don't explain to them why it is you're asking for another take, they get unhappy with it. So you have to communicate constantly with them. You have to be vulnerable to them. You have to say, here's what I'd like you to do and here's why I'd like you to do it, and let them go, you know, I don't think that's what he'd do. And then you go, okay, fine. And you can argue it or not. But, you know, it's the same relationship you have with anybody else that you're sharing a creative process with. It's an embarrassment of riches, because you can do anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should do anything. Now the onus is on us as visual effects designers and on filmmakers to use this very powerful tool in a way that is evocative rather than just spectacular.
Batman!
Joel Schumacher had asked me way before the film was made. I think he wanted to, in his words, cast the composer almost first, and at least that's what he tells me. I mean, he's just trying to be flattering. I remember it was months and months before the movie was being made, and we had many discussions about the nature of the score even before the script was completely hammered out.
Elliot Goldenthal is so brilliant, and I had just heard about 5 minutes of music that he wrote for something else, and I thought he's so complex and so interesting.
He's a genius. He is an absolute musical genius. He's able to get Joel's sensibilities of making a live comic book, and his music goes along with it. It's just so tastefully done. And he's a character. He's an absolute character, but the music speaks for itself. It's just extraordinary.
I sort of made it my business not to go back and relook at the movies. I didn't want to be influenced too much by another director's work or another composer's work. And I think that Joel Schumacher was very, very encouraging in that respect. The similarities is that we both used a large orchestra, and the rest is dictated by character. And myself, Danny, anybody would, you know, just reflect what they see on the screen and take it from there. What was very, very helpful in the movie is all the characters are so delineated. The heroes are heroes, the villains are villain, the zany is zany. So I think for the opening title theme, I wanted to have a sense of power and flight. Also, I was trying to remember myself as, you know, like a little child playing with maybe little Batman toys, and I was thinking, what do little children sing? They sing their own scores, you know? If you watch kids play, they're composing their own music. And I was going, yeah, da 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 da. And this is what children do. So in working that kind of first impulse out, I got on the piano and then said, what was I doing as that little kid just then? If you play it as a march, it's very heroic. But if you play it with sort of horns and low strings and has this dark, sort of mysterious past thing. Composing themes and leitmotifs that sort of are recognizable for the characters is a much easier process, because you can always sort of have modified repetitions and permutations on the same theme and just go down a different avenue structurally and chordally, and so it makes it a lot easier. I mean, the work was extraordinarily difficult, but in terms of the conception, it is an easier thing than, let's say, in a Shakespeare, if you have to compose to a Shakespeare film. I never felt any pressures. The only pressure I felt was time, which in many instances gave me the fuel in which to complete the job. There was no time for procrastination. I think myth is a very, very important thing. There's not much difference between the myth in the Wagner operas or myth in Batman, Spider-Man, Superman. So that's something I welcome to work on if time allots me. It's something. It's great to work on that mythic level. The heroic stuff is always great when you get the giant brass sections and you know, they're all on overdrive, and you're in there with the orchestra. It's an incredible, exhilarating feeling.